Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Um, as Brian had said, we have quite a few slides, so I'm going to go through those fairly quickly. And if you do have questions, just look at the end to get to those, and I'll address those. But I'd also like to tell you that I'm always available if you take down the information on this first slide and do have questions in the future. You can always get a hold of me by email or by telephone. And I can usually get back to you. If not addressing it immediately, I can get back to you the same day. This is our logo. So it goes on every system as federal standard indicates. You have to have an indication as to who has installed the system on the system piping in the basement, and that allows the person to get back to you when they need servicing. If it's not on the system, especially here in Wisconsin where there's no legislation as to who puts it in, that's usually a clear indication when there is no buddy listed, that somebody that wasn't certified, and quite frankly, they don't want to be found. Going on, as Byron was saying, I taught for 6 years under Bill Angel. He approached me many years ago asking me to help him teaching in the classroom, and I kind of followed him from state to state and city to city, doing that teaching for certification. All of these guys are pretty well retired now. Bill is retired, but still on different, he's retired from teaching, but still on different councils and so forth. The Merck Midwest University Radon Consortium was passed on to Bruce Sneed down at University of Kansas. He's now retired, and that belongs to Brian Hansen these days down there. I'm going to go through some science just to start off with, so we are all kind of on the same page as to what we're dealing with. When we're dealing with soil gas, and a number of years ago, approximately 2017, everything got switched from radon mitigation and vapor intrusion mitigation to soil gas mitigation, because it became very, very confusing, especially in teaching different courses, because the protocols for the cure, let's put it that way, or working on vapor intrusion was different than radon mitigation. In 2017, that was all combined together because the protocols were all, quite frankly, even in the past, all the same, but it became standardized and became soil gas mitigation. So a lot of people still refer to it as radon mitigation, but radon mitigation and doing it a typical standard way will cure up any kind of soil gas, including vapor intrusion. So within that soil gas, you have a certain amount of methane that creates the pressure that's pushing this stuff through the slab. Radon's just catching a ride on that methane. Then you have a certain amount of mold, bacteria, chemicals. This is vapor intrusion area. And of course, humidity, which is usually about 70 to 90%. So if you have a dehumidifier, that's running in the basement, that usually, depending on how much that dehumidifier is running, is a sign of how much soil gas is coming into the house. Once you put a system in, that humidity level drops way down, usually to well under 50%, usually about 40%, if not lower. Going on from there, where do we stand on the periodic table? All of these are essentially what we're dealing with. So radon is here, it goes over to polonium, which it breaks down to, and then bismuth, which breaks down to, and there's a few other levels that bounces between. And the final breakdown chain is lead, of course, and radon is the biggest supplier of lead to the human body anywhere in the world. Radium is a big challenge. That's what a lot of water systems have in it, and that is the mother of radon. So radium breaks down into radon. From there, it goes down the chart. Let's take a look at that in a little bit closer detail. So you've got uranium, takes about 1.5 million years to break down. Thorium converts to, synapses over to radium. Radium synapses to radon. Radon's got one of the shortest half-lives of any isotope. It's 3.8 days. From here to there, which is the end of the breakdown, is about 3 months' time in body breaking down. If you start with radium, that's about a 5 months chain to break down in the body. Still gets you to the same point, which is lead. You don't want lead in your body no matter what. Timelines, facts, just a short detail. I think that Mara had sent out some information that I had given her that's a little more detailed than this. Radon is one of the oldest research carcinogens in the world. It was identified in 1879. Radon program was started in different European countries at about 1950. In the U.S., it was started about 1970. The radon map was produced shortly after that in the 70s, and it was measured 6 different ways, and is really a good, concise mapping of what radon looks like. That map is added on to as people call into these different call centers, get tests and so forth. Most of the time that testing is collected and bounced back to the feds in the way of zip codes and so forth. And so all of that just gets, that data and that mapping gets better and better over time. One of the most important things, and this is something that just about nobody knows, is that anything you read about radon as far as studies go in Europe and the United States is based on average of 1.25 picocuries, and quite frankly, just about nobody in Wisconsin has 1.25 picocuries. It's far higher than that because it's a linear science. Let's say you have what the World Health Organization in 2009 came out with a study. Said about 25,000 people in the United States, 25,000 people in Europe will die every year of lung-induced, radon-induced lung cancer. That is all based on putting the mass population into an atmosphere of 1.25, and they know by theorem that will come out to about 25,000 deaths. So what this gets into is that you have to look at that 1.25 and say, well, if it's a linear science, what would happen if everybody had 2.50? Well, that would be double the 1.25. So you would take that 25,000 deaths per year and just multiply it times 2, and it keeps going that way. So it gets pretty stiff pretty quickly as to what the impact can be, not is, but can be on the population. Mortality rates, like I said, about 25,000 per year at concentration of 1.25. And I go through this. If everybody had a radon rate of 10, which is really prevalent as far as a good average in southeastern Wisconsin, you'd have about 200,000 deaths. Let's see. Okay, evaluating exposure rates to the population in Wisconsin. Yeah, you could look at Wisconsin as having potentially a death rate of about 3,000 people per year. I think currently the state is saying maybe 900, that sort of thing. But again, when I've asked people that are handling this stuff time after time, the answer is usually that they figured it at 1.25 picocuries, which is slightly skewed. Besides lung cancer, radon is suspected in some sort of involvement. Again, until these studies are finished, which who knows when, they're looked at as leukemia, could be Parkinson's, could be MS and Alzheimer's. All of that has to do with radiation in the blood and the lead content. Turning on, this is something that if anybody remembers Conrad Weifenbach, who was the head of the state program about 10 to 20 years ago, turning on a bathroom fan, a powder room fan. This is one of his studies. He found that he could spike any house turning on a bathroom fan, powder room fan, or kitchen exhaust fan about 2 to 3 times within 30 minutes. So what does that mean? What he could do, and let's say you start off with 10 picocuries per liter in a house as an ambient rate, he could get it to 20 to 30 picocuries within 30 minutes. And until he turned that fan off for about an hour, it didn't go back down to 10 picocuries. So exhausting air out of the house can cause a vacuum issue, and vacuum issues change the pressure plane. Pressure plane just invites more and more gases into the house. So how does radon work? You've got millions of atomic particles in the air that you can breathe in. Each particle, like I said, had a half-life of 3.8 days. As a person or an animal, I had a client years ago that had parrots, and they didn't care about themselves, but they sure cared about their parents and what their parrots were breathing in. That disintegrates into the lungs that at 3.8 day synapse of that particular particle, it changes into polonium, which is some nasty radiation, if not all radiation is nasty. But essentially that polonium is no longer airborne, and it becomes what you might call fallout. That falls into the lung linings and keeps disintegrating for the next 3 months. These disintegrations happen at a rate of 7 per second per picocurie per liter. Again, this Conrad Weifenbach figured this one out for me years ago. But so what does that mean? If you had 10 picocuries per liter in a house, you would have 70 alpha particle strikes per second in your lung lining. So the more you have of this, the more potential those strikes have to cause DNA changes and cell changes within your body. Polonium, which we discussed with Laura, polonium disintegrates into bismuth and then into lead and final breakdown of uranium. It's, as I mentioned before, also radium is the largest, radon and radium is the largest contributor to lead to the human body on a worldwide basis. Let's go to the state map. The map on the right is one that's typical, that's used in the state of Wisconsin. That's a high radon map. What I did is I took Conrad Weifenbach's findings back many, many years ago, probably 20 years ago now, of the karst map. And the karst map is, karst is anything that's underground cave structures, rock structures, that sort of thing. And what he did when he came into office, he overlaid that map on the high radon map of Wisconsin just for to see what that comparison was like, and this is what the comparison was. So all of these blue areas and bluish areas and so forth are all karst areas, underground cave structures in Wisconsin. What I did a number of years ago is I was curious and saying, well, how does that relate to, you have natural springs in the state, how does that relate to the same map? Because those springs start from very deep in the ground and they come to the surface and they're perking off constantly. So that's all the blue dots here. These are all springs in the state of Wisconsin, and how that relates to the karst map. Excuse me, how that karst map relates to the high radon map in Wisconsin. On from there, so in the state of Wisconsin, you have 726 zip codes. 55% of those zip codes have averages over 4 picocuries per liter, which is your federal action point, which many people get confused by. That is not a safe level, never has been a safe level. From 1970 to 1985, your federal action point was 1.4. And that was from the Department of Energy. When the EPA took over the program in 1985, they essentially said, we're not going to look at any program on a carte blanche basis. We're going to essentially look at it individually, program to program, and see what's practical. And what they decided was, because they had so many complaints from mitigators over time, that they could not keep the 1.4 picocuries. It was just unsustainable. So they had simply gotten a lot of very tough projects done in Colorado, which they could get under 4, not anywhere near 1.4. So what they decided to do is simply take the 1.4 as an action point and raise that to 4.0. At the same time, in the same paragraph, they say, but we highly recommend mitigating it or anything over 2 picocuries per liter, and that gets you down to somewhat of a safe level. Again, when you look at the average of nationally of 1.25 picocuries per liter, producing about 21 to 25,000 deaths, that 2 is reasonable, not wonderful, but reasonable. 4 is totally unreasonable. So anyway, the state of Wisconsin has areas that are 100 to 200. We do these numbers of these per year, up to about 200 picocuries per liter. It really is a different size system. You're dealing with a lot of airflow, and it's tough to get them down unless you know what you're doing, and have a system that's big enough to handle that. There's some levels in the state over 800 picocuries per liter. I know there's some stuff in the center of the state that somewhere around 600. Not a lot of people have this. It's something I developed many years ago. The radiation exposure rate comes out of the Federal Physician's Guide to Radon, and that gives you a equivalency of how much radiation exposure you have per measurement of radon, and that equivalent is comparable to modern chest X-rays per year. So even at 2 picocuries per liter, you're still at equivalent of 100 chest X-rays per year. The lung damage a chart I got from John Lorenz, who ran the state program before Conrad Weifenbach, and that was a chart, like I said, I got from him that I use. Actually, these days, many mitigators use it. I've been approached at a number of conferences by people saying that they use this chart on a daily basis, and it really made a big impact on their sales. But at 4 picocuries, which is your federal action point, you're still at equivalent of smoking 5.3 cigarettes every 18 hours in that atmosphere. How does soil gas come into a house? Some of these charts that I see on the internet are, I mean, they're nice, but they're very misleading. I've never found anything that goes sideways. Exterior gases essentially go to the ground. What you're concerned with mainly is what's coming up under the slab. Some crocks I've found and proved many years ago don't usually have anything to do with the rate coming into the house. Testing over time in multiple places in the house, what I found was that 50% of the houses, the some crock area was the lowest in the house, and 50% of the time it was highest. Scientifically, you just got to throw that data out and say, yeah, well, it seems to not really have a big impact one way or the other. Where people get confused is that you do need to seal up large spaces like that's opening, because once you pull vacuum on the slab to try to get your radon rate down, you can't do that with a big hole in your slab. I kind of compared that to trying to fill a basketball that's got a bunch of holes in it with air, and you simply can't do it until you plug the holes. Cracks are not a great entry point, I've found over time. In 2017, those standards changed from, for many years, sealing all cracks to seal the main ones. And what the EPA had looked at originally was that you could lose a lot of air out of the house by pulling on vacuum from the subslab, pulling air from the basement through those cracks to the exterior, and that could raise somebody's heating or cooling bills. We have never ever found that to happen. And unless you have extremely large areas of open cracks and that sort of thing, it doesn't seem to have a big impact on the mitigation whatsoever. So sealing, we've gone from doing everything to doing very little in the last 10 years, and it seemed to has not had a great impact whatsoever. Much to a lot of these drawings and so forth, just the opposite. Concrete is porous; it's like hard sponge. So you can do just about anything. It's still going to go through concrete. Most of the building, and I know building changes, protocol changes from area to area, state for state, and even city to city. What we have here going on in the southern part of the state is not what we have as far as building protocols in the southeast part of the city or the state. Here you have visqueen or 15 mil plastic under the slab. That has always been called vapor barrier, which I've kind of fought for many years with builders and architects. And they think it's just great. I've always told them that it seems to do absolutely nothing. It doesn't keep, it was to keep this differential going on that keeps uh, gases from coming into the building, but I've never found that or anything else to hold any kind of vapor back. My argument has always been if you can't hold a large molecule of water back, i.e. humidity in the basement, you're not going to hold back anything. Ceramic tile covering the basement floor does nothing. Linoleum does nothing. Paint or epoxy does nothing. Ceiling floor cracks, some cracks, all of that does nothing. The only way to stop soil gas intrusion is taking that gas that's under the floor to the exterior, and that is called subslab depressurization. You're simply creating, much like a bathroom and a bathroom fan, you're pulling air from that given space to the exterior of the building. State of Wisconsin and certified professionals, it's all always listed at lowradon.org, and they do a pretty good job of keeping up with us as far as who is certified, who is not certified. What I found over time, which is unfortunate, and it's unfortunate that we still have absolutely no legislation in the state for just about anything. We just started a program for testing daycare centers a year ago, and I'm not sure how successful that is. I know we did quite a bit of testing last year for daycare centers. So only certified individuals can be on that list, and you can only get insurance in this industry if you are on that list and certified. What we have found over time, and I had a big problem years ago with Better Business Bureau because of this, and what I found in going through our certifications, how we're handled on the internet, on numbers of sites and so forth, is that the Better Business Bureau listed people to the tune of about 50% of the listings on the Better Business were on certified individuals, and they had them listed as A+ providers in the radon industry. And other sites will do the same. These referral sites don't really care to check credentials. They simply take money and post that company as a provider.
Hi, Paul, this is Brian.
Yeah.
I hate to do this to you, but we'll have to go with about 10 more minutes of presentation time, and then we'll do some Q&A.
All right. No, that's fine. I'm just going to keep going, and let's see where we get to. Protocols are written by AARST and NRPP, and we as professionals have to abide by those standards. Getting into mitigation a little bit. Some cracks need to be closed airtight, as I spoke before. That seals that large hole and the drain tile coming in from the interior of the building. At that point, it's a starting point for mitigation work as to what you're going to be doing. But that large hole has to be sealed. Getting back to that again, they would like to see something that's clear. They would like something that has at least a window in it, but it needs to have a 4-inch clean out, and that is a federal standard. And that allows you to open that up, get a pump switch, and so forth. Some crack draw points. What we're trying to do is if you do have drain tile and you do have a sump crack, which would go hand in hand, you can pull out of that sump crack to the exterior. All the piping needs to be pinned to the wall at some point, and you need to have a disconnect, a rubber disconnect in that piping so that the piping can be removed. Some pump can be gotten at to fixed and so forth if necessary. You can also go into the drain tile other places. If you do have drain tile, that's what we're trying to get to. That gives you a nice surrounding of vacuum all the way around the house. That can go through the rim joist. If you have block walls and block wall exposure outside, it can also go through the block wall. Figure in the left is just what I was speaking about. Sometimes number of draw points, if you're getting into old houses or typically from 1940s on back, you'll find that you have less and less draw on a house, and sometimes you need multiple draw points. The figure on the right shows that we actually had to come back, put the left-hand draw point into the ground and into a gravel space that we found that they had some work done to the basement, added gravel, and then concreted over again. Once we went into that, it worked fine. You get into very old houses again, typically that 1940 on back, where you have a pressure field extension problem under the floor. You have to test the floor. You use the figure on the left is a micromanometer. It tells you how much vacuum you're actually pulling, if you're pulling any. You can set that up on a chart. Then the chart on the right is indication and mapping of pooling of air under the floor. If you have that kind of pooling and it does communicate, which is the overlap in those purple areas, that's great. If it doesn't communicate, like the top area, then you may have to go into trenching or connecting those areas together. And you'd use a regular perf pipe to do that. It's got holes in it, as the figure on the right. You surround that by gravel, put your viscreen back down, pour concrete over that. Get into very quickly here, outdoor mitigations. We use 3x4 downspout, which has always been used since the 80s. It matches the house and it gives you far better flow on the system. We can get up to, depending on the fan used, we can get about 190 cubic feet of airflow if we need it out of that. Some other demonstration here. It's also cosmetically far more acceptable to people. Flow rates. Flow rates are one of the most important thing to a successful mitigation you have. These are all anemometers, and they're anemometer readings. The lower figure on each one of these tells you how many cubic feet per minute you're actually moving, and how many it's going to take cubic feet per minute to get the house to vacuum. As you notice here, we've got just going across 120, about 122, then 100, or I'm sorry, 77, which is lower, unusual, 127, 112, 142, etc. That's really important thing to know, because once you get into these, which are minimum standard systems, which are using 3-inch exhaust piping, 3-inch exhaust pipe by federal standard, you cannot use if you're expecting more than 80 cubic feet of airflow. In fact, when we did a study in Colorado, we could only get 70 cubic feet per minute out of a 3-inch pipe system. So as you can see, compared to the last slide I showed, in about 90% of the homes that would not get the house to total vacuum, that unfortunately has pushed mitigators to only minimum warranty, which is to get you under 4.0, which I keep on reminding them is a failure point, and not a good warranty. We've always, for 24 years, have warrantied our system to get under 2 picocuries with a 0.5 as a post-mitigation average for all of our systems. Bad outdoor mitigations can't do anything like this. You have to exhaust over the roof line. It has to be at least 10 feet away from the window or any area that might be occupied, which the middle slide doesn't fall into, either by the window or by the decking to the left of it, or this one to the right that simply is exhausting very, very low. Other ones, exhausting under a window, exhausting less than over the roof line. And then you have the one on the right, which is turned back down for some odd reason, which you can't do at all. Some other ones, fan in the house, very popular. Can't do that. Can't exhaust at the ground level. And then the one on the right, which is very clever, but it exhausts right into the windows. Indoor mitigations can run through the garage. These would be typical in the past. Last year, January, we added a protocol that says it has to be insulated, which makes the system pretty chunky. If you don't, the slide on the left shows what happens. Pipe is running at 50 degrees. Let's say your garage goes to 70 to 120 degrees up at the roof line during the summertime. That piping that's uninsulated tends to drip all over the place and will ruin a good amount of drywall if you have it. Electrical. Electrical cannot be plugged in. The slide on the left was one that an electrician did. We called him back, said, nah, it doesn't meet code. You got to come back and hardwire the whole thing. It cannot be plugged in at all. And the one on the far right shows how that runs into the existing duplex that was in the house. Another plugged-in system can't do that. The system in the middle run through with the switching on the inside of the house can't do that. One on the right is just a plug run through a window jamb. Plugged in on the interior of the house cannot do that. These would all be acceptable. You can have a hard disconnect on the left, which is a little bit overkill. What we typically do is run a switch, which the two on the right would indicate next to that, but they're all hardwired and have to be. You might get some calls on frozen systems. Any system can freeze. It depends. This year, I would tell you, is a prime year for freezing of systems. When you have a late fall, wet fall, you have a lot of water under the slab. That water is going to be pumped into the air, and when the air temperature hits outside about 5 below zero for at least 3 days, you're going to get icing on a system, and it doesn't matter what that system is made out of. It can be downspout, it can be piping, it could be glass, metal, you name it. It is going to freeze at the exhaust point. The frame over on the left is how that sets up and starts freezing, and that once that starts to do that, it simply just fills in over a number of days, and that all clears. You shouldn't really touch a system that's freezing. It all clears by the time typically the outdoor rate gets to be about 15 degrees. How do you get tests? Easy to do, as you guys know. I always send people to the Southeast Wisconsin Radon Information Center. I always test in essentially three places. I run one test on either end of the basement, about 3 to 5 feet off the floor, which is breathable space, and I put another one in the upstairs bedroom. That gives me a flavor of how much is getting upstairs from the basement, and that gets me a lot of callbacks because somebody will call and say, geez, it's 14 picocuries in my upstairs second floor bedroom, and it's like, yeah, it doesn't stay in the basement. Nobody ever said it stayed in the basement. So unless you test upstairs, you really don't know what's going on in the house. And that's the end of the presentation. So at that point, I'll take questions if anybody has any.
Yeah, folks, you can come off mute if you want to, or in the chat. I do have one from Michelle. Her question was, if the humidity is still high in the basement
Yep.
with a radon system installed, does that indicate the system may not be working?
It certainly could indicate that, but it's not. I'll tell you what happens. It has to do with airflow under the slab. If you have a newer house, and what I look at is being modern is anything from about 1964 to the present. The typical building construction in Wisconsin was to place about 68 inches of gravel under the floor. If you have that, you can pull air through that very, very quickly, and your humidity rate will drop. If you have houses that are, let's say, 1950s on back, that stone under the slab was not typical practice, so you're not pulling as much air from under the slab. And it all has to do with airflow. So you can definitely cure the radon issue, but you will maybe not see full dropping of the humidity rate. And I had as a matter of fact, my mother's house many years ago that I mitigated, that was built in 1951, no gravel under the slab. That dropped only about 15%. If you're dealing with a house that's newer construction, I can typically tell people that'll drop that house 50 or 60%. So it really depends on how much airflow you're getting from under the slab as to how much that humidity is going to drop.
And is there a time period where you should have your system serviced or re-looked at for any purpose?
Not really. the only thing I go by is the manometer. Manometer is that little U gauge on the side of the tube. When people call me up and ask me the same question, what I'll say, well, I say two things. What is the manometer reading now? And what is written under initial vacuum pressure on the label that's next to the manometer? Those two figures should match up. If they do match up, then you should have the same radon rate you had, and the system was working fine. But federal standard is to retest the house every 2 years. If it's mitigated every 5 years, which I don't really agree with, if your radon rate is deemed low. The problem I have is what is low, because most people don't understand that low is, I think, under 1. You have to go by that federal, that national standard of 1.25, producing 25 or 21 to 25,000 guts per year. Is that low? I don't think that's a low figure if you lose that many people. So you want to be below 1 somewhere, I think. Like I said, in post mitigation, our systems, we have 0.5 reading, which is outdoor air is 0.4. So what I typically tell people is you can get you as close to outdoor air quality as pretty much you can get.
All right, thank you. Yeah, if anyone has any other questions, just come off mute and go right ahead. I'll give it a few moments, see if anyone has questions. Otherwise, we'll just wrap up here in a few minutes.
I had one comment. Using the gutters, the 3x4 gutters, is that for like gravity type system, non-pressurized?
Well, if you're talking passive systems,
Yeah.
you could do that, but there really is no passive. You can, because you're not dealing with pressure. There's new home construction protocol, but other than that, there is no. And those typically run through the house. I don't. I was asked to be on the national committee to oversee new standards, and I said I wouldn't do it because I just don't believe in new home construction setups, because they simply don't take into consideration the propensity for very high rates. And I've seen too many, especially here in the eastern Wisconsin, that were set up with 3-inch piping. And after they were done, they were still in the 30s as far as peak curies per liter. You can't guess at what you're going to end up with. But for downspout, I would never run a passive system that way, because there's really no protocols that says that a passive system has to be above the gutter line. And I'd only run downspout on the outside of a house. I've run passive systems, not many, but I've run systems many years ago that were just up and out, essentially very close to what those illegal systems were. They were motorized. You cannot do it motorized. Passively, there's really no real flow of gases that you got to be concerned with. So it's just a matter of ventilation at that point.
Okay.